All right, all right. Hi, everybody. Thanks, you guys, for tuning in once again. This is Nicholas Salter hosting the Keep It Real podcast with yours truly. So this episode is going to be a little bit of a heavy one. I feel like I always say that. I feel like every episode is somewhat kind of dark-ish, kind of. But a lot has happened at the time of this recording in regards to the passing of, well, not really passing, it's more the brutal murder of the UnitedHealthcare CEO, Andrew Whitty. Brian Thompson. Andrew Whitty is the guy overhead of the whole organization or health group or whatever. But Brian Thompson was the man that was murdered December 4th. And that was definitely a heavy day. And there's also the election cycle that also occurred too. President-elect, or now going to be President Donald Trump again, which came to a shock to a big portion of the country, especially those on TikTok. Even though, in my opinion, I feel like, we probably should have saw that coming. Yeah, I feel like that was definitely not should have been too much of a surprise. Really, I think it's a surprise, and I guess I'll kind of get into it here, talking about these subjects, kind of dive into it. I plan on having a couple of guests as well to kind of talk about this stuff a little bit more in depth, possibly. But now just kind of catch up and just kind of allow me to talk on these subjects. It's been a little bit since I've recorded. Truth be told, I was a little bit worried about touching on these subjects because all this kind of revolves around, politics and economics, which is definitely not a friendly conversation to have with people. But in my humble opinion, I feel like that's actually part of the problem. Part of the reason why I think it was such a surprise when Donald Trump, got elected, and it might have been a surprise to some people, of the amount of vitriol that, or the amount of celebration that occurred when a man got shot in the middle of New York City. I think kind of comes to what's happening when people fail to communicate with one another in an effective way. I know a lot of things like religion and politics, finances, these things are supposed to be quote unquote taboo. You're not supposed to talk about this with your friends or with your family. But I feel like when we don't talk about it, that's when we start losing touch with one another, and tensions and emotions kind of start boiling over into what we're seeing today in reality, which is people kind of fighting each other, looking for ways to kind of dehumanize each other and kind of point the finger and just be really ugly to one another instead of actually solving the root cause of the problem, which will take time, persistence, dedication, collaboration. It would be a gigantic pain in the ass, basically. But that's really the only way you can see true change, true sustainable change, is through collaboration and working together with other people, even people we don't even like. But even to start that process comes to be willing to come and sit down at the same table with one another. And I feel like we just lost the ability to do that, unfortunately. And because we lost the ability to communicate with one another, now we want to kill each other. Looks like that's the point that we're reaching, which is really bad. Where we rather stab each other in the back than be willing to sit down and have a conversation. These are the two subjects I kind of want to touch on in today's episode. So we'll kind of start getting into it. But like always, give me a follow if you do like the information kind of being shared here, or my take on things, or if you absolutely hate me and just want to hate follow me, that's also an option too. Haters are just confused fans after all. So, this is the opinion of just like some guy that was probably raised middle class most of his life. So, have I really had to truly struggle like someone that might be less economically fortunate? No, I'll say that absolutely not. So, I may not know what it's like from that personal experience, and I'll be the first one to say it. That's a good point. I digress, though. I feel like that does not still mean that you take the law into your own hands and act as some kind of vigilante and gun people down. I don't think that's sustainable for the long term for America's future and the kind of people that we want to be. And I get it. People will say like, oh, well, America was founded on revolution. We were founded on, after the Boston Tea Party and, people just kind of standing up to the British government and be able to stand up for individual liberties. It's like, well, yes, that did result in a war. But the purpose of that war was because of a sequence of impending laws and regulations that mounted up over time, with the British and the British leadership purposely trying to crush the will of the American people. because they knew that we were starting to act a little bit more on our own, a little bit more individualistic. I think King George really hated that. So he wanted to implement these laws to kind of break our will, per se. Like, he was directly trying to oppress us, literally, by making soldiers like being housed, in their houses and everything like that back in the day, and basically trying to make them economically poor and dependent on the English government with all these impositions of taxes and other things like that nature. Like, it was purposely made to crush the American people, to depend on England. I think it's a little bit different in that case. And even in that regard, there was still the actual national convention when all the different leadership of the states, the 13 colonies, got together in order to write what we now known as the Constitution. And a lot of those guys hate each other. They couldn't stand even being in the same room as each other. Like, it was basically on site as soon as they saw each other. That's how much they fucking hate each other. But they were even willing back then to put aside their differences and recognize that if we fight too much in between each other, there won't be a country to fight for anymore. So they had to put their pride aside and be willing to work together despite the hatred and vitriol that they feel for each other. So even though, yes, it was bloodshed initially that might have jump-started the process, and that was more in self-defense from the British proactive nature of trying to impose the will on the American people. And even after that, they came together unanimously to form the laws and policies that we still live and abide by today in our country. So it's, even then, the revolution back then had a better reason than just shooting a random CEO in the street. That's not going to have any major effect on anything besides increasing the security that CEOs have, and they're probably going to start encrypting their calendars. Like, you're not really doing anything except making the millionaires more self-aware and increasing the security in their personal time. I feel that's really the only major outcome it's going to have. And I know there's been some health insurance policies that might have been repealed recently. Those, even if they repeal them now in the short term, once all this blows over in about a year or two and there's like another big economic crisis or another big fucking plague or whatever the case may be that might distract the American people, they're going to smuggle this policy in anyway, once we're all distracted with something else that happens in the future. So, I mean, that's the problem when you try to take the law into your own hands and do some kind of martyr. I don't even call him a fucking martyr. He's just a killer. But try and do some kind of martyrdom to try to initiate change when all you're really going to do is just deprive a family of their father for Christmas and for the rest of their lives, for that matter. So, I mean, I really don't. He didn't solve anything. He didn't. I mean, he just fucking killed a guy in the middle of the street, and people trying to praise him as a hero. And it's a sick joke, honestly, in my opinion. And to see the comments out there saying, hey, like good riddance, or like, oh, this is a celebration, or go to other CEOs, hey, you're next. Like, it's really fucked up. And I think no one's really pointing that out, like, at all about. And here's the thing, I'm no stranger to how bullshit the health insurance system is, like, at all. And I understand there's things going around how, like, like major healthcare insurers like UnitedHealthcare is denying like a third of claims, which even in that case, a third of all claims, are they separating the claims that are actually like, 'cause sometimes people submit claims that's not covered by insurance, and you can look at your certificate of coverages, or like your summary benefits of coverage, and you can ask that from your insurance, and you can literally ask for a breakdown of what's covered and what's not covered. You can also call into your insurance agency and get a breakdown before you get a procedure done, like, hey, is this going to be covered, and how is it going to be covered, and get a detailed breakdown of that before you even get the service. I feel like most health insurance companies offer this service. So, I mean, I feel like most of these claims that have been denied are for stuff that wasn't even covered initially. And even past that point, a lot of doctors also fail to give a lot of information on it. They might go straight into a major procedure without showing any evidence of, step therapy, or any evidence of basically, did you try to do x-rays, physical therapy, all the things before you decide to do this very costly procedure that's not just going to be costly just for the health insurance company, but also costly for the member themselves, right? So, I mean, I feel like a lot of these claims that even have been denied, I mean, what are the actual claims specifically, or like what's the general pattern of the ones that have been denied? Like, what we need to start asking ourselves the deeper questions instead of just taking a look at one statistic and then immediately that's the reality of it, and United Health and health insurance companies are evil. And also, by the same token, I have read, like, watched YouTube videos and other, like, and looked into other, like, books and stuff like that. I talked about the healthcare system and how they would outsource adjudication to third parties to kind of help speed up the rates at their kind of denying claims, and these parties actually get paid and incentivized based on how many claims they're able to deny. And then these third parties would actually make people resubmit claims by putting on extra information that might be completely superfluous, just to try to get them to waste time and try to mitigate people trying to go through the appeals process. There is a lot of bullshit in the UnitedHealthcare system as well, but that's going to be addressed on a systematic level. It's not going to be addressed on we're just going to kill everybody level. Because the problem with that is that now you're going to have the American people, we're not even trying to enforce the understanding of how the healthcare system works. So they think just because they shoot the CEO, that they're shooting the person that's denying their claims. No, there's claim adjudicators, there's actual doctors on the health insurance side that are also evaluating these claims as well, with their own like doctors and like health directors and all that. Like they have their own people that also look into this information too. So it's not really the big guy, Brian Thompson, the one stamping no on your claims. No, just like how the CEO at fucking McDonald's is not the one operating the cash register, right? It's the same premise. Just because the guy's at the top, he's not the one that's directly controlling everything. And most guys at the top have a direct responsibility to their shareholders, okay, too. So there's a lot of people at the top that might be pushing a bad system for the sake of, economic profit that may not be directly correlated to the guy that's sitting in the CEO chair. And for all we know, he could have been doing his fucking best trying to improve the system as much as he can within the confines of the system itself. But yet, you decide to shoot the guy in the fucking middle of New York City, and people are just like raving about it. It's fucking disgusting. And just very against, I think, American traditional core values of trying to look out for one another. And I get it. You're just like, well, if you really believe that UnitedHealthcare is a demon, or all these health insurance companies are a demon, therefore they must be eradicated at all costs, where does the line stop between the people that start being prosecuted for operating in that system? Because you also got to remember, too, is that they're getting the revenue from the premiums that they're taking in. So if you really want to hurt UnitedHealthcare or hurt any other health insurance company, shooting the main CEO or like the mascot or whatever is not going to promote any kind of long-term systematic change. The best way to do that would be to hurt their bottom line, hurt their pockets, right? Hurt their profits. So what would you do is, as a member or as an employee, and you have health insurance through your work, is that you get together with the other employees saying, hey, we're sick, you're not going through UnitedHealthcare. Let's bring this up to our HR department saying that we do not want to partner with UnitedHealthcare for the remainder for the remainder of the year, or even in the future. We just don't want to deal with them anymore. And you work with your department and your HR so that way to work with a different insurance carrier. So that way the premiums stop rolling in from UnitedHealthcare's perspective. And also there's also hospitals you can work with, facilities, doctors. And actually a lot of doctors now, they're saying like, hey, no, we're not taking certain insurance carriers because of the amount of claim denials that we've experienced with them. It's happening now, all the time, even before the assassination occurred a couple weeks ago. So that's really the big issue here, is that people, because they don't understand how the health insurance system works, with that lack of understanding comes a misdirected anger that will not really impact the system at large, but will kind of rot away I feel like the souls of the American people, honestly, man. I've never seen this amount of hatred and vitriol in a while. I feel like since I've been an adult, just checking this stuff out myself personally. It's a bummer that things have gotten, well, even more of a bummer. It's a tragedy that things have gotten this bad over these last few years, probably this last decade or so. So that's really my 2 cents on that. I'm definitely no expert myself, but just from what I've read and what I looked into, this is a very complex problem that's going to require a very complex solution. But the big note here is that if you want to hurt the system, you have to do it systematically. And just trying to burn the whole thing down is going to cause a lot more pain and suffering for all people, instead of just the people that you're trying to intentionally hurt. It's not going to work out that way. And even looking at this kid like Luigi, reading into him, I mean, he's like an Ivy League student, very intelligent. He came from like a rich family. His family has some political influence. It's like this guy had the whole world set up for him. And he decided, he got so caught up in the hatred and the vitriol and the unfairness of the system, probably because he's been disaffected by the system himself personally, or maybe one of his loved ones have. And he just felt like, I feel it too, as being like a young man, of feeling like you want something to happen or you want something to change and you're not seeing any mileage of it changing. So you just want to forcibly just kind of take care of it and do things yourself. I mean, I get it. We all see the hero stories on, at the movies and all that shit of like, we can be the one person to stand up and make a difference. Maybe we can, but we have to do that in the right way, in a constructive way, in a way that's sustainable, in a way that sets a good precedent for the American people, and not just setting a precedent of we need to kill people in order to get our way. He thought he was doing something for everybody else, but truly he was doing something that's really selfish and self-gratifying to him. He wanted to get the hedonistic pleasure of taking out what he saw as the head of the problem himself and making some kind of statement and starting some kind of revolution that really, most people aren't going to start getting up and shooting because, they're self-interested. They don't want to go to jail. Most people aren't killers, which is good. I think it's fundamentally that's a good thing. But then B, even if they were, all that would do was probably make the American government stand up and enact some kind of military force, some kind of martial law on people, and will result in a reduction of our civil liberties over time, and become some kind of police state because of the overwhelming amount of violence, stuff like that in the streets. Like, either way, this is not going to have the outcome that he intended for it to have, right? I mean, the good news, I guess, if there is good news in all this bullshit, people are looking more into the health insurance industry, but my problem is I feel like this is going to be like another woke flavor of the month, to where it's like it lasts for like maybe like 2, 3, 4 months, and then people just go back to their regularly scheduled program, and nothing fundamentally changes. That's the problem with these like outbursts and temper tantrums, because that's basically what it is, a temper tantrum. That's what happens with these outbursts of emotion and temper tantrums, is that it feels really good in the short term, but in the long term, you see no long impactful change, except for the fact that he's going to be behind bars for probably the rest of his life. Like this is a kid that had all the intelligence. He literally 3D printed a fucking gun to shoot the guy in the back with. Right? He's not an idiot. Right? Well, he's a guy that could have used his intelligence, could have used his wealth, could have used his family's political power and influence to open up some kind of organization, right? He could have lead and kickstart some kind of organization to fight against what he sees as the villainy of health insurance companies, right? To fight against these policies, to help kind of put candidates into the government to kind of help fighting against these policies and putting new laws in place to kind of regulate insurance agencies. It's like he could have been a lot more proactive about this, given if he was a little bit more forward thinking and not so emotional and just not so impatient with trying to get a result now, trying to get a result today. He just let that evil and all that anger fester up inside of him into just an outburst, basically. An outburst that took alive a possibly innocent man. And honestly, even if it wasn't an innocent man, because, CEOs, maybe they do some sketchy shit. Even if he wasn't innocent, let's say he's a fucking complete utter scumbag, whatever. That still doesn't give you the right to kill him. We have laws and policies here in the United States in place to get people through due process, jury of their peers, and then sentencing and then prison time. Like there's processes in place to make sure the world does not devolve into its own form of chaos and vigilante justice of people saying, because I feel a certain way, therefore I get to shoot you in the face. No, that's not how the world works. And thank God it's not how it works, because honestly, here's the thing that people don't think about, is that what if people have a problem against you or have a problem against your industry? And they start going around, start shooting people, start shooting up places, start setting buildings on fire, start targeting your loved ones because you are affiliated with the group that needs to be exterminated. Paths like this kind of leads to a lot of genocide and like a lot of bad things that we've saw in history, these last 200 years. But I'm not sure we want to repeat. Like, violence is not the end-all, be-all solution that we need to focus on. Sometimes it is necessary. This is not one of those times. And I feel like that has not been stressed in any form across the board. Which is really scary to see. And I get it, man. People are suffering. People have been denied medication or denied claims and have had family members die because they couldn't get the care that they fucking needed, which is disgusting. And people need to be held accountable in the insurance companies, right? But they need to be accountable within the system, because if we do it outside the system, like our boy Luigi did, all that's going to create is a lot of chaos, pain, death, and suffering for a lot of people. It's not going to solve anything. It's just going to make everything worse. Because honestly, people may start like wanting to copycat and start going out there and taking their own vigilante justice. You might people be like, oh well, I care about this issue. Let me go find the head guy of this person and start shooting him. Like, this is not a good precedent to set for the country. But either way, I feel like I'm kind of talking around in circles here. But definitely, he could have used his intelligence and his means to become a better force for good in the world and establish some kind of organization and stand up and be a leader, maybe involve other young men that are angry and without purpose to kind of create a meaningful, impactful change by changing the system the right way. And it would take time, it would take years, it would take preparation, but when they did fix it, they would have fucking fixed it. But instead, he decided to try to take the easy way out, and now not only are they just going to get a new CEO up there, and nothing's going to fundamentally change. If anything, these might get worse, especially under Trump's America, but that's going to be the next part of the conversation. But I feel like things are just, they're not really going to improve, and he's ruined his life in the process, and probably ruined the life and reputation of his loved ones and those around him. I think he had a couple siblings, or imagine being his mother, and you guys see your young boy in jail, and then wondering holy shit, where did I go wrong as a parent? To have that this kid that basically had the world in his hands, that wanted to go off there and ruin his own life, to ruin the lives of other people, of Brian Thompson's family, and lives of maybe some UnitedHealthcare workers, friends and family, and then set a bad precedent for the country. That's a lot to put on your loved ones and the people that care about you. And he didn't. Yeah, maybe he did consider that, but he didn't consider it warranted enough to not take the action in the first place. I think the dude's basically almost like a borderline psychopath. I think he kind of had to get to that point in order to be willing to kill somebody like that. And this is what happens. And here's a real scary thing, is that everybody has a dark side to them. Everybody does. We all have anger. We all have sadness. We all have this capacity for evil and darkness within us. Not to get esoteric, but we do as human beings. We do. And to be a good person is a choice you have to wake up and make every single day, because I feel like most people, if not all people, have a reason to be an utter selfish dick. I think we all do. But what makes you a good person is whether or not you give into that influence. And our boy Luigi, he did give into that influence. Maybe he isolated himself. He didn't let himself open up and talk to his friends and family. He just decided that I'm going to Lone Ranger this shit and try to be an impact, or try to just make some kind of difference that I feel like needs to be made. And maybe a difference does need to be made, but it needs to be made in the right way. And I just feel bad, because there's a lot of disaffected young men that are probably feeling like him, to where it's like they're so pissed off at the world, or their station or their status in the world, that they'd rather be notorious. Like, if they can't be famous, or if they can't make the impact or have the attention or the influence that they want to have, they're like, okay, fine. If I can't be the best kind of person, then I might be able to get that kind of status and influence by being the worst kind of person. And I feel like Luigi, he just chose to be the worst. I don't know. I think that's probably what I'm about to say on that subject. I'm just I'm very disappointed in our country and our reaction to it, and Luigi. And just the whole situation in a nutshell. And insurance companies too. The fact of things have gotten this bad to where people feel like they have to go out there and kill somebody in order to get their attention. That proves that there is something wrong with the system, and it does need to be changed. But as I said, it needs to be done in the right way. But yeah, that's my take on that, of the UnitedHealthcare CEO murder. Let's call it what it is. It was a murder. But now kind of going into the second part of this conversation, which would be the U.S. election that took place. Man, like I said, very fun and enthralling conversation topics that we have today. And I know if I'm not like usually my chipper, energetic self, usually I don't think I'm really that energetic doing these podcasts, but it's hard enough talking about this stuff. And I talked about it with my dad, with it talking about it, just saying like, I know my views on this is definitely in the minority, and I feel like that I'm just opening up a can of worms to be utterly shit on and disregarded by a lot of my friends and family. But it's just, he said, Nick, if you really feel like what you have to say is important, then you should be, and it could be able to help somebody, then you should do that. You shouldn't let fear kind of get in the way of what you feel like your gift is to give to the world. Which is why it takes so long for me to make these episodes. I get scared too, man. I'm just a person. I get afraid of criticism or backlash, or something happening to me or my friends and family. I get it, man. It's hard to stand up and have a voice for what's right, especially when you have a society kind of pushing that you keep your mouth shut for the sake of the collective. But all that does is rob you of your personal power, of your self-respect, and then it allows the world to spiral out of control and deteriorate into this emotional cesspool of bullshit that we got going on today. When the smart people stop talking, that's when we start getting in trouble. And I know I'm saying myself as a smart person, but I mean, point being is that when we stop having these conversations and when things start getting out of control, so even though how difficult it might be, as much pushback you might get for it, you have to be able to stand up and stand for what you believe in order to make sure the core values in the country kind of stays on track, you know. But yeah, going into Mr. Trump here, a lot of people were shocked at the outcomes of the elections. I wasn't personally too shocked. I mean, I knew it was going to be close, but the fact is, most people probably thought Kamala was going to win by a landslide. Indeed, she did not. She definitely did not. And honestly, I mean, I think I saw it coming. The problem is a lot of people that are terminally online had this conception that everybody thinks like them because all they do is operate in their own echo chambers. And then they learned the hard way during the election night. No, the world does not work that way. Unfortunately, actually, fortunately, it does not work that way. Again, like I talked about at the beginning of the podcast, this is an example of when people kind of get caught up in their own kind of collective echo chamber nature, and they don't communicate with people that have opposite views that they have, that they start getting out of touch with the pulse of society and how most people feel. And that's really the truth, is that people just, they're sick of being told what's the right way to be, what's the right way to think. They're sick of being told that their beliefs don't matter, or being labeled as racist or bigots, or and actually the main issue is they're sick of their economic pains not being listened to. They hate institutions, basically. Most people, I think, hate institutions. That's why populism is basically winning over. And Donald Trump poised himself as a candidate that knows what the problem is, which is the other side, and their policies. And he's gonna come in here, undo all those policies, and basically just fix everything. That's what he ran on. He basically ran on like a fear-based campaign of blaming the other side and solving everyone's problems. And even making something like immigration, which is an issue in this country, but I don't think it should have been the biggest hot button issue. Apparently, it should have been really the economic crisis and healthcare, by the looks of it. But no, that's the Republicans have done. I watched videos on this too. They've done a phenomenal job of spinning a narrative, a very cohesive narrative on all their sides. Like all of the Republican political pundits, YouTube channels, Daily Wire, all those folks all have the same similar charismatic messaging, especially directed towards young people, towards young men and disaffected middle-class Americans, saying the reason why your life sucks right now is because of the Democrats and the left and their policies. You get rid of them, get rid of their policies, your life will get better. That was the whole campaign that he ran on. And unfortunately, it was very effective. And also, I think another problem is that us on the Democratic side, we are so disjointed in our own goals that we don't look like that we lack cohesion. Even to the degree to where if you try to stand for something that you feel like is important, someone will actually label you as someone who's a capitalist or a bigot or someone that just doesn't care about people as soon as you try to bring up a conversation topic that's not some of the big identity politics kind of topics that people want to talk about nowadays. So it's because the Democrats are disjointed on their side and Republicans are unified in their narrative and pushed all the blame on the Democratic side, people are like, Democrats suck and don't care about our problems. Republicans say it's Democrats' fault. Therefore, I'm either not going to vote because I hate Republicans, but I also don't really care for Democrats right now, or I'm going to vote for Trump because fuck Democrats. And that's basically the how the election came down to. And yeah, I feel like, and here's the thing too, people keep saying, oh man, we need like a liberal Joe Rogan, or it's like, well, hey, we had a liberal Joe Rogan. It was fucking Joe Rogan himself before, again, the left started alienating him for having conversations with people that they didn't necessarily support, firstly. But then secondly, it's just when you keep alienating somebody like that, you're going to keep pushing them further and further to the other side when you're not open to engage in a dialogue and have a discussion with them. And here's the big thing that the left needs to realize. You can't just keep demonizing people and then be surprised that they don't advocate for your side. That's not how people work. I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. No, I mean, you're fucking idiots. I mean, I'm just like, this is like this is something that if you know the pulse that people hate institutions, they're going on podcasts talking about this stuff, and especially that people are very anti-intellectualism right now. Like they hate having data and stats being thrown at them. Like they're just kind of going off of vibes and kind of based on how people feel. Like there's not a lot of critical thinking happening right now. And I think the murder of a couple weeks ago of the CEO, that's a perfect example of that. People don't really want to look deeper into things. They're just so worked up by how their life is right now. They just want to do something. And that's why they put Trump in office. Because honestly, Trump, especially with the stupid ass tariffs, that's going to jack up prices at least by probably by 15% for most goods and services. Like, we're not going to see an economic boom. We're probably going to see even more of a crash than we have currently today. But people didn't think about that. They just saw, oh, Republicans usually lower taxes, usually means more money for people. Yay. They didn't think about his actual policies and the things that he wanted to implement and the financial effects it's going to have on their day-to-day basis. People don't want to critically think anymore because it takes effort to do research and to look at different articles and listen to the opposition of your argument. Nobody wants to do that. They just want to be fed their own beliefs on a silver platter and then hope that the world just turns out the way they want it to. And no, it's not. I just think it's very... you can hear my voice too. I'm just very frustrated and just kind of done with people right now, which is, a little bit more negative than I'm usually inclined to be. But it is frustrating to see all this kind of taking place. And also, God damn it, with Kamala, with her ads that she had because here's the thing, even Democrats knew that the conservatives are doing a better job of capturing young men and their attention, especially with things like Daily Wire, Jordan Peterson. Like they got a whole conservative pipeline and just pumping fucking young adults in there. And the left's like, oh man, we need a liberal Joe Rogan. It's like, well, no, you just gotta learn how to speak to the problems that the youth, particularly young men, are having, which came out a lot in droves to support Donald Trump. You got like, and the videos that they posted from Kamala Harris in support of her side were videos talking about, oh hey, Republicans are planning to ban porn, so you won't be able to jerk off as much as you want to. It's like, really? That's what you think? That's all that we amount to, is that you think that we're here just to jerk off and just get our rocks off and then go back and play video games. It's like, you can't even bother putting in enough research to see what are the things that young men really care about. And then not only that, try to put forth a positive vision and a positive journey that young men can take to become better men and become impactful and important to society, which is the message that Republicans are fucking pushing. And that's why it's working. It's like, you don't need a liberal Joe Rogan, man. You just need someone that's able to say, hey, part of being a man is being willing to help step up and take care of other people, right? Take care of your kingdom, take care of your tribe, take care of your loved ones. That's part of masculinity. The reason why you have that masculine strength is not for the sake of yourself. It's for the sake of other people in your life. So you stand up for the people that can't stand up for themselves. That's the kind of message that you need on the left, right? To give kind of young men some kind of purpose, some kind of aim, so that way they don't feel so lost and dejected. Not telling them that, hey, they're going to ban your porn because you can't get laid. What the fuck is that? And then the second part of another one was like, oh, hey, real men vote for abortion. The abortion issue is a different topic that I'll cover on a separate video. But it's like, again, this whole thing is like, you need the vote of young men and that you're losing their vote. And then you decide to still push your own narratives of hey, they're going to take away your porn and your pointless hedonism, and they're going to take away women's rights. How you pull in young men is by advocating for women's rights. Women's rights, they are important, they are valid, and they matter. Duh. I think that should go without saying, but I should say that for the case of people don't want to label me, put me in a certain category. But if you're trying to get the young man's vote, the best part you should probably try to aim for is seeing what they actually care about, what they pay attention to, and then speaking to that. You couldn't even be bothered to do that. You just want to push your own narrative, put young men at the end and put a period, and hope that can claim some votes. If anything, I feel like whoever saw that advertisement were probably more appalled and probably wanted to vote for the other side more. Probably had the exact opposite effect of what you intended for it to have. I'm not gonna say who I voted for in the election. Just say I didn't vote for either of the major candidates. So I hate them both in their own individual. Well, I'll say this: don't like Donald Trump. Probably lean a little bit more conservative in terms of actual certain policies that might need to be put in place. I'm a centrist. For those that don't know, I feel like that should be painfully obvious at this point. But then also, even though I definitely respect Kamala Harris more as a candidate compared to Trump because he's he's just done a lot of illegal shit, and not only that, he is a salesman. He's like a car salesman. You know what I mean? He's very good at schmoozing and talking to people. He's very good at painting a narrative. Like, I bet he's a really fun guy to crack a beer with. Don't get me wrong. Doesn't mean that he's in a position to run a country. The whole point of him running a country is based on this, like, really just trying to sabotage our unity as a country. Like, he's not for anybody. He's only for himself and his own self-aggrandizement. That's Trump's whole point. He's not trying to really make America better. He's just trying to make himself more rich for him and his buddies, and have the glory of being the man in charge. I mean, that's why he literally like wrote a book like, How to Win a Deal or some shit like that. It's like his whole thing is about winning and self glorification. That's all he cares about. Like, think about it. If you have all the money, power, and influence in the world, what more do you want? Oh, to be in charge of everything. He's bored. He's a bored ass old man. That's all his time on his hands. So he wants to use that time to have control over other people, to feel good about himself because daddy never loved him properly. There's a whole psychoanalysis bag of bullshit he's got going on up there. But yeah, like he's primarily run off of his own insecurities, essentially. And unfortunately, he hasn't recognized that with him being fucking 70 plus years old and shit. But yeah, and he's just a reaping bag of insecurities who's president to kind of gratify his own ego, not for the sake of his American people. He's not. But he's enough of a smoozer, and people, they're enamored by his charisma and the fact of like, oh, he seems like a laid back guy that I would talk to like a normal day of work. So therefore he must be like me, since he talks like me, even though he's nowhere close to you. And he'll never understand your experience because he hasn't been poor probably all his fucking life. So it's like he doesn't really know how to relate to you, but he knows how to pretend to relate to you to get your vote. That's what salesmen do. I mean, they're good at making you think that they are on your side and that they're advocates for you so they can get what they really want. He's a professional at that. He's a businessman, and he's able to trick half the country into thinking that he's really fighting for them, and he's not. But then again, with Kamala, I think people are done with the infantilization of people, and just they're sick of being forced to care about things they may not really care about. Identity politics is out. I mean, I feel like if this is one big lesson I feel like we should probably take from the election, is that all this woke bullshit, I think it needs to be over. I think it needs to be done. American people obviously don't give a shit about that in any shape, form, or facet whatsoever. Like, he literally beat the two female candidates that we've ever had within the span of 10, 12 years. And he literally said, "Hey, grab women by the pussy." Like, I don't I don't know what else. Like, literally, this guy is one one of the most misogynist fucking people that he could put up there on stage, and people still, a lot of white American women gladly voted for him. So it's like, yeah, people don't care about woke shit anymore. They don't. If they did, he would have gotten nowhere near the office, and he got in office now twice. I'm sorry. If the messaging would have worked, it would have worked by now. Like, stop trying to peddle woke shit that no one cares about, because they just don't care about it. So that means identity politics, trying to push things from minority groups. Is like, people, I think, now are in a stage of individualism and just caring about themselves, which is why the Republicans won out in this election. They're like, hey, yeah, we're not for racism, we're not for bigotry, we're not for misogyny, but we can't buy bread. So, sorry, voting for the guy with the red tie because he might get more money in our pockets. I think that's basically what the election came down to. So I think until Democrats get back to what the Democrat Party is supposed to be about, and that's more about the working class, the middle class Americans, and how they're kind of suffering right now, and even then the economically poor Americans too, and kind of getting back to, hey, we need to help those in need, not just helping people feel better about themselves emotionally because they don't know of the 72 list of genders what to pick from. Like, it's stop the shit. We're done with that. That's dead and gone. Actually, I think a lot of companies are also rolling back their own DEI policies, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies now. Now that Trump's in office, they're like, oh shit, we don't have to care about that anymore? Great, bye. It's like they never cared about it in the first place, let's be honest. B, it's just, yeah, I don't think it was that effective, but they did it to try to play ball with the consumers because they thought that's where the American people leaned, and they want your money, so they're going to pretend to care about the things that you care about. It's called appeasement, right? But now that they recognize people don't really give a shit about that, at least most people, they're like, oh, well, in that case, we don't need that stuff anymore. So I mean, I think the culture, I don't think the culture has changed too much, but I think this is how people probably felt for a while, but they were too afraid to speak up about how they really felt until they saw the votes and they realized, oh, I'm not alone in this thought process. Yeah, fuck wokeness. Yeah, fuck wokeness. It's like, this, again, the case of where we're so afraid to have conversations with each other that people, I saw it all over Reddit too. People are like, oh my God, I never realized I had so many Donald Trump supporters as friends or as family. Like, people fucking divorcing their spouses over this shit. And I'm like, that's your own fault, your own marriage, if you don't have the capacity and the transparency and the honesty between the two of you to talk about where your political ideologies lie. Like, I feel like that should be one of the first things you talk about when you fucking get involved with somebody. Like, your core values is linked to politics. So if you're very just like gung-ho, self-sufficient, like, you're very just like about chasing that bag, you're probably really conservative. You're more about like, volunteering, helping people. If you're more about, really just trying to look at more, disaffected minority groups and things like that, or like, like the people that aren't doing too well in society, you're probably gonna lean Democrat. Like, I feel like these are things that should naturally come up in the conversations you have with your significant other over the course that you kind of date and then eventually marry them. You know what I mean? Like, I feel this stuff you should kind of be talking about already. So it shouldn't be a shock that you voted for Trump. It's like, well, yeah, babe, I've been talking about how the economy's been fucked for like the last 10 years and how much I haven't really appreciated the last Democratic candidates that we've had. It's like, yeah, is it a shocker that I voted for Trump? Or should you be like, oh, you voted for Kamala? It's like, well, yeah, I mean, women's rights and abortion, I'm a woman, it's important to me, so yeah, I voted for that. It's like, I feel like this is conversations that shouldn't be taboo to talk about. Like, if you can't talk about this stuff with your friends and family, who the fuck can you talk about it with? Like, is it just me? Am I just like in Crazy Town or something? Like, if you can't talk with the people that you should be able to trust and confide in the most about your political leanings and how you feel about the world and your philosophies, who the fuck can you talk about it with? I think that's part of why people vote for Trump too. I think they're just so tired of being scared of talking about things they're supposedly taboo, or talking about things they're not supposed to, or like being canceled because based on one tweet you made like 10 years ago, or like not being able to say anything in regards to how you feel about the certain economic or political climate in your office without risk of losing your job. Like, people are sick of being canceled for being who they are, And I think that's the ironic thing about wokeness, is that it's supposed to support diversity, equity, and inclusion, but yet if you have a diverse opinion or idea, you immediately get chastised and alienated for it. That's not good. That defeats the whole purpose of the movement in the first place. You can't say that we're inclusive of everybody unless you disagree with us. Like, that's not really inclusion. Anyway, I digress. I think there's a compounding factors of why people voted for Trump, but those were the major ones. Is that people are just tired of feeling alienated and labeled and isolated, and they're economically struggling, and they kind of hate institutions right now. So therefore, they're going to vote against all those things, and vote for the candidate that doesn't really care about you, but he acts like he does, and he wants your vote for. So, but hopefully now the Democrats have learned their lesson of like, people talk about Bernie Sanders. I don't really know too much about him. I'm not really a socialist. I don't really believe in that or any of that kind of stuff. But it sounds like he would have had a better chance of winning than most other candidates in a Democratic space, which I probably agree with that, yeah. But you need a candidate that knows how to speak to the people. You don't need a Joe Rogan figure. You need someone that will just get down and talk to the people, and not just pretend that you're all high and mighty from your ivory tower of millions of dollars trying to push woke ideologies. That shows how out of touch you are with the average American consumer currently. Yeah, they're out of touch, so they lost race. But now we're going to be ushered into this age of republicanism these next 4 years, and it's going to be a very wild and probably very financially difficult 4 years for a lot of people, and this have been more so, which is ironic that people really voted for someone like Donald Trump, who's only going to make insurance companies and other private companies like that even stronger now than they were currently. America, welcome. Yeah, so I think things are going to be a little dicey, but I don't like to leave things on a negative note. I think this is a time for us to start recognizing that people are sick of not having these conversations. They're sick of hiding their true thoughts and feelings and who they are. They, to the point to where they rather go and fight and get in an argument than be quieted or be shunned. Which I think is an opportunity for people to start engaging in these conversations with another productively, not violently, productively, to start engaging in these conversations, start doing their own research, start being able to speak your mind, make content, make videos, talk about this with your friends and loved ones. Like, this is a time for the American people. It's a wake-up call, because we've been sweeping shit under the rug for the last 15, 20 years. And now, we're tripping over it. We're tripping over the fucking mess that we've made. And now we've uncovered the rug and we see how much shit is actually underneath there that we haven't taken a look at. This is what we should have done in the 2016 election. We didn't, probably because COVID probably got in the way a little bit. And now we've tripped over it again in 2020. We've tripped over it again in 2024. That's the problem. We can't keep pretending that there's not deep-rooted issues with one another in this country, because then we're going to vote for radical people to say the things and do the things that we wish we could say and the things that we wish we could do. And it's going to lead to a very radical and alienating culture that's going to lead us to try to destroy one another. It's not going to be good for anybody. So we need to be able to start and be able to talk to one another before we end up killing one another. And I feel like we're starting to see evidence of the former happening with the result of the CEO's murder recently. I think that's a sign that things are getting worse. We can't afford not to share our views with one another. We don't have that luxury anymore. I think this is why free speech is so important, not because it's just a conservative talking point, but because if we don't do that, all that resentment and all that emotion is going to boil over and it's going to turn into something really ugly. Like, that's why people go to therapy, is to talk out their issues, talk out their problems, right? Otherwise, it becomes this form of depression and self-hatred that makes you like want to kill yourself. Like, you can't keep all that sickness in your body and expect it to have a good outcome. I think it's the same thing with people and their views on the world and their political philosophies and all that. You can't keep internalizing all that stuff because it's not good for you and it's going to rot you from the inside out. Talk with your friends and family about how you're feeling. Be respectful of their own, with their own side of the argument, and be willing to become more educated on topics that you may not know too much about, and try to be more open-minded. And that will lead us to be more cohesive. That will lead us to be more well-informed on certain subject matters. That will lead us to, just come together as a country for once. And maybe if we actually have a good fundamental understanding of the problems at play, because we talk to one another, we'll be able to start instituting practical solutions for these problems, instead of just yelling at each other and pointing at the other side saying that it's your fault. And that's why Donald Trump won, is because of that, exactly because of that. So we can't afford to do that anymore if we want to keep this country together. We have to be willing to talk about what's ailing us with the parties, even with people that we don't like. Come to the same table, have a conversation, and it's not going to be solved in one conversation. You might get angry after you part ways, after you walk away, but then you go back and think about it, saying, hey, they made some really good points. You're not going to win the war in a day, right? It's a series of battles. So just have these conversations, read these articles, become well informed. Don't just get sucked into the propaganda machine that's going to push through all their own levels of bullshit, their own stats that are hand cherry picked to support their point. Like, it's hard to be a well informed citizen. I'm trying to get better at it myself, people. It's difficult trying to see it out there, trying to get a hint of what's going on in the world without too much bias. I think there's always going to be a little bit of bias, but just try your best and try to use critical thinking and try to stay as well informed as possible. Use your best judgment and talk with other people. We're not meant to be in a bubble. We're not. We're not meant to be in an echo chamber. We're not meant to just hold all of ideas to ourselves. Our ideas die so that way we don't, right? So talk about the things that you might believe so that way your belief system, that way your critical thinking process can be recalibrated and adjusted over a course of these conversations while you become better at thinking and a more informed citizen over time. And you become a lot harder to manipulate and control by these top people in power that want us to be distracted by each other, by the way. Not to get too much deeper into that, but I think there's something to be at play here to where if we're too busy attacking each other, it's distracting from what they're doing at the top. That's all I'm going to say there from that point, not getting all that conspiracy bullshit. But yeah, so I know that was a lot. That was a lot in these 47 minutes. I think this is one of my longer monologues that I've done, but I feel like, we've had a lot to talk about, a lot to cover. There's a lot going on in the world right now. So, I think the big wrap up I say for this episode is that we need to learn how to talk to one another before we start killing one another. That's what it's looking like right now. And things are just going to keep getting worse and worse over time if we don't learn how to open up to one another, have sympathy, have empathy, and try to use critical thinking and collaboration to come up with practical, long-term, sustainable solutions to our problems that are systematically affecting us today, currently. I'm planning on having a guest or two here on these next couple of episodes here. To kind of talk about this more back and forth one-on-one. So it's not just an echo chamber with myself, hopefully talk to people that may have a slight disagreement with my views so we can kind of work this out in real time so people can learn what an honest dialogue looks like, right? Might get a little heated, might not. Don't fucking know, but you know what? I mean, these guys are my friends, so we should be fine. And like I said, if you can't have this conversation with your friends and family, the people that you trust, who can you have these conversations with, right? So I'm trying to practice what I preach and talk to people that might differ from my opinions to see if we can kind of come to some kind of common foundational principle that we can move forward together and proactively on. But yeah, I want to say thank you guys for listening. It's always been fun talking to you, even though it's more like a one-way conversation, but you know what I mean. Stay tuned for the next episode. And like always, keep it real. Thanks, guys.